The silence in the observation room was deafening. 12 seasoned Special Operations commanders stood behind bulletproof glass, watching the timer count down. 47 seconds. That's all it took for everything they thought they knew about warfare to change forever. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from. And if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. Staff Sergeant Ella Morrison had been hearing the whispers since the day she first set foot on Fort Braxton. The sideways glances in the mess hall, the not-so-subtle conversations that died the moment she walked into a room, the betting pools on how long she'd last before requesting a transfer back to regular infantry. "Women don't have the killer instinct," she'd overheard Colonel Davis saying to his aide just last week. "Special operations isn't about equality, it's about survival, and when bullets start flying, biology kicks in." Ella had bit her tongue that day, just like she'd done hundreds of times before. But today was different. Today was evaluation day for the elite Phantom Unit, the military's most classified special operations team. Only 6 operators would be selected from the 47 candidates who'd made it through the grueling preliminary training. The morning started at 500 hours with a 5-mile run through the Carolina mountains. Ella finished third, her boots hitting the dirt road in perfect rhythm while several male candidates fell behind, their heavy breathing echoing through the pre-dawn darkness. She noticed Major Richardson timing her with his stopwatch, his expression unreadable behind his wraparound sunglasses. "Not bad for a desk jockey," muttered Sergeant First Class Tony Castellanos as they assembled for weapons inspection. Ella had heard about Castellanos: 3 tours in Afghanistan, 2 Purple Hearts, and a reputation for never backing down from a fight. He stood 6'4" with arms like tree trunks and a scar running from his left temple to his jaw. Ella didn't respond. She'd learned that words were wasted on men who had already made up their minds. Instead, she meticulously cleaned her M4 carbine, each movement precise and practiced. Her father had taught her to shoot when she was 8 years old on their family farm in Nebraska. By 14, she could hit a dime at 200 yards. By 18, she was out shooting seasoned hunters at the county fair. The psychological evaluation came next. Dr. Amanda Foster, a civilian contractor with 20 years of experience profiling special operators, led each candidate through a series of scenarios designed to test mental resilience under extreme stress. "Imagine you're trapped behind enemy lines," Dr. Foster said, her voice clinical and detached. "Your team leader is wounded and bleeding out. You have a choice: attempt a dangerous extraction that might save him but could compromise the mission, or complete the objective and leave him behind. What do you do?" Ella's answer came without hesitation. "I completed the mission. One life doesn't outweigh the lives of everyone depending on mission success." Dr. Foster made a note on her clipboard, but her expression revealed nothing. The afternoon brought combat drills in the Killing House, a maze-like structure designed to simulate urban warfare environments. Each candidate would face the same scenario: hostiles holding civilians in a multi-room compound. The objective was simple: neutralize all threats, extract the civilians, and exit the structure. Time limit 3 minutes. Ella watched from the staging area as candidate after candidate entered the kill house. Some emerged successful within the time limit. Others stumbled through, making critical errors that would have resulted in civilian casualties in a real scenario. A few never made it past the second room, overwhelmed by the complexity and pressure. Castellanos went in 37th. He moved like a predator, methodical and aggressive. His tactical movements were textbook perfect: pie in corners, using cover effectively, communicating clearly with his imaginary team over the radio. He cleared the structure in 1 minute and 53 seconds, emerging with all civilians accounted for and no friendly fire incidents. "Beat that, farm girl," he said as he passed Ella, sweat dripping from his forehead but his breathing barely elevated. Captain Jennifer Walsh was next. A former Army Ranger with 8 years of combat experience, she'd already proven herself in Iraq and Syria. Her approach was different from Castellanos, faster, more intuitive.
She seemed to anticipate where threats would emerge before they appeared. 1 minute and 41 seconds. The observers in the booth nodded approvingly. Then it was Ella's turn. She stood at the entrance to the kill house, checking her gear one final time. Her rifle was loaded with simulated ammunition, paintball rounds that would register hits on the pop-up targets inside. Her tactical vest felt familiar and comfortable, broken in from months of training. She closed her eyes and visualized the layout she'd memorized from studying the briefing materials. "Ready, Morrison?" Major Richardson's voice crackled through her earpiece. "Ready, sir." The buzzer sounded.
Ella moved through the entrance like water flowing downhill. Smooth, silent, inevitable. The first room contained 2 hostile targets positioned behind makeshift barricades. Most candidates had approached this room cautiously, using the doorframe for cover while engaging each target separately. Ella did something different. She rolled a flashbang grenade, a training version that produced light and sound without the dangerous concussive force, into the center of the room. In the split second of confusion it created, she entered low and fast, engaging both targets with precise double taps to the chest before they could reorient. 4 seconds elapsed. The second room was where most candidates made their critical mistake. 3 civilians were positioned among 5 hostile targets in a complex arrangement designed to test target discrimination under pressure. The conventional approach was to move methodically, identifying each target carefully before engaging. Ella's peripheral vision caught the glint of a weapon barrel from behind a desk to her right. Instead of stopping to assess, she fired while still in motion, her muscle memory taking over. The hostile target dropped. She spun left, identifying and neutralizing 2 more threats in rapid succession while her feet never stopped moving. The remaining hostiles fell in the next 2 seconds as she flowed through the room like she'd rehearsed this exact scenario 1,000 times. Room 3 contained the civilians she needed to extract. 2 adult mannequins and 1 child-sized figure positioned behind an overturned table. But this room had a trap. Hidden speakers would simulate the sound of approaching enemy reinforcements, forcing candidates to choose between a careful extraction and a rushed escape. The sound effects began just as Ella entered the room. Heavy footsteps, shouting voices, the metallic click of weapons being readied. Most candidates would have hurried at this point, potentially mishandling the civilian mannequins or missing hidden threats. Ella's heart rate remained steady. She'd grown up hunting with her father in situations where patience meant the difference between success and failure. She methodically checked each civilian for injuries, part of the scenario requirements, while simultaneously maintaining awareness of the room's exit points. A final hostile target popped up from behind the overturned table just as she was preparing to move the civilians. Her response was instantaneous, a single shot to the target's center mass while she shielded the child mannequin with her body. She guided the civilians to the exit point, her movements efficient but not rushed, despite the sound effects suggesting imminent danger. As she crossed the threshold with the last civilian, the timer stopped. 47 seconds. The observation room erupted in confused murmurs. Major Richardson checked his stopwatch twice, then looked at the official timer display. Dr. Foster leaned forward in her chair, studying Ella through the glass as she calmly unloaded her weapon and waited for instructions. "Did she miss anything?" Colonel Davis asked, his voice tight with disbelief. "No, sir," replied Lieutenant Torres, who had been monitoring the electronic scoring system. "All hostile targets were neutralized. All civilians extracted safely. No friendly fire incidents. 0 rule violations." Castellanos stood with his arms crossed, his confident smirk replaced by a look of stunned silence. Captain Walsh nodded slowly, a grudging respect evident in her expression. But Ella wasn't thinking about their reactions. She was thinking about her younger sister Sarah, who had died 3 years ago in a roadside bombing while serving as a medic in Syria. Sarah had believed that protecting others was the highest calling a soldier could have. Every shot Ella had fired in that kill house, every decision she had made, was guided by that principle. The debriefing wouldn't come until tomorrow. Tonight, she would return to her barracks, clean her equipment, and prepare for whatever challenge came next. She had proven something to herself in those 40 seconds, but she knew the real test was just beginning.
In the observation room, the silence stretched on, as 12 of the military's most experienced special operations leaders tried to process what they had just witnessed. Everything they thought they knew about warfare had just been challenged by a 26-year-old staff sergeant from Nebraska who happened to be a woman. The betting pools would be closed by morning, but Ella Morrison's journey was just getting started. The selection results wouldn't be announced for another week, but Ella could feel the shift in atmosphere immediately. Where before she had been invisible, now she attracted stares everywhere she went. Some were respectful, others skeptical, and a few openly hostile. 3 days after the Kill House evaluation, she was reassigned to temporary quarters in the officers' barracks, a clear indication that someone higher up the chain of command was taking notice. Her new room was sparse but private, a luxury she hadn't enjoyed since basic training. Lieutenant Colonel Marcus Webb appeared at her door on Thursday morning, his dress uniform immaculate despite the early hour. Webb commanded the Phantom Unit, and his reputation preceded him. Former Delta Force, recipient of the Medal of Honor, and a man who reportedly hadn't smiled since 2019. Morrison, walk with me.
Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now, back to the story. They left the barracks and headed toward the secure briefing facility, their footsteps echoing off the concrete walkways. Other soldiers they passed snapped to attention when they saw Webb, but his focus remained fixed ahead. "Your performance in the Kill House has generated considerable discussion," Webb said without preamble. "Some of my colleagues believe it was a fluke. Others think you had inside information about the layout." Ella kept her eyes forward. "Sir, I prepared for the evaluation using only the materials provided to all candidates." "I know. I've reviewed the security footage from your quarters. You spent 47 hours studying those schematics over the past month." Webb stopped walking and turned to face her. "Tell me about the flashbang technique you used in Room 1. "Sir, the conventional approach created a predictable pattern. Most candidates engaged targets sequentially from cover. I calculated that the momentary disorientation would allow for simultaneous engagement, reducing overall exposure time." "And if the flashbang had been a dud?" "I observed a backup entry point through the ceiling ventilation grate during my initial assessment. If the primary plan failed, I would have implemented alternative tactics." Webb's expression remained neutral, but something flickered behind his eyes. "You had contingency plans?" "Sir, I had 7 different approaches mapped out based on various equipment failures or unexpected variables." They resumed walking toward a building Ella had never entered before. Her security clearance wasn't high enough for most of the facilities in this section of the base. The guard at the entrance scanned Webb's ID card and waved them through without question. Inside, the briefing room looked like something from a spy movie. Wall-mounted displays showing satellite imagery, tactical maps, and what appeared to be real-time intelligence feeds from around the globe. 6 chairs were arranged around a circular table, each position equipped with encrypted communication devices. "Phantom Unit operates differently than conventional special forces," Webb began, activating one of the displays. "We don't kick down doors and clear buildings. We prevent wars from starting. We eliminate threats before they become crises. We exist in the spaces between official military operations and diplomatic solutions." The display showed a satellite image of what appeared to be a compound in a mountainous region. Red markers indicated multiple buildings, vehicle positions, and guard posts. This facility is located in the Khyber Pass region. Intelligence suggests it's being used to manufacture chemical weapons components that could destabilize 3 different governments. A traditional military response would require a full-scale invasion. Diplomatic approaches have failed. We need a scalpel, not a hammer. Ella studied the imagery, her mind automatically processing approach routes, defensive positions, and potential extraction points. How many civilians are there? A village of approximately 200 people sits 3 kilometers south. They cannot be relocated without compromising operational security. Timeline. The facility becomes operational in 18 days. After that point, the threat level escalates exponentially.
Webb switched to a different view, architectural blueprints of the compound's interior. 6 operators, 72 hours maximum on site, 0 tolerance for collateral damage or international incidents. Ella realized this wasn't a hypothetical briefing. This was a job interview. "What makes you think I'm qualified for this type of operation, sir?" "Your kill house performance demonstrated something we rarely see, the ability to process multiple variables simultaneously while maintaining precision under pressure. But that's just the beginning." Webb pulled up her complete military record on another screen. "You scored in the 98th percentile on strategic thinking assessments. You speak 3 languages fluently. You have a degree in mechanical engineering from the University of Nebraska." He paused, studying her face. "More importantly, you understand restraint. Most operators excel at destruction. We need someone who excels at precision." The door opened and Captain Walsh entered, followed by Sergeant First Class Castellanos and 3 other soldiers Ella didn't recognize. All wore the subdued patch of the Phantom unit on their uniforms. "Your new teammates," Webb announced, "if you're selected." Walsh nodded professionally. Castellanos looked like he'd swallowed something unpleasant, but he extended his hand in greeting. The others introduced themselves with call signs. Ghost, a demolitions expert who looked barely old enough to drink. Viper, a sniper whose eyes seemed to catalog every detail of the room. And Bishop, a communications specialist with intricate tattoos covering his arms.
"We've been briefed on your kill house performance," Walsh said, taking a seat at the table. "Impressive work, but field operations are different. Mistakes don't just cost you points, they cost lives." Ghost leaned back in his chair. "No offense, but the kill house is basically a video game. Real operations involve variables you can't control. Equipment failures, weather, human unpredictability. Have you ever had someone actually trying to kill you?" Ella considered the question carefully. "No direct combat experience in hostile territory, but I've been shot at during training exercises by instructors using live ammunition deliberately aimed to miss by inches. I understand the psychological pressure." "Not the same thing," Castellanos interjected. "Training rounds won't rip your intestines out if you make the wrong move." Bishop spoke up, his voice calm and analytical. "What's your contingency if communications go dark during an operation?" "Depends on the mission parameters and available resources. Primary objective completion takes precedence over extraction unless civilian lives are at immediate risk." "Even if it means sacrificing team members?" Viper asked, her tone sharp. Ella met her gaze directly. "I would sacrifice myself before sacrificing team members. But I would sacrifice anyone, including myself, to prevent civilian casualties that could be avoided through proper planning and execution." The room went quiet. Webb made a note on his tablet. "Final question," Walsh said. "What's your greatest weakness as an operator?" Most candidates would deflect this question, or offer a strength disguised as a weakness. Ella had learned that honesty, even uncomfortable honesty, was usually the most effective approach. "I have difficulty trusting others to maintain the same standards I hold myself to. I tend to over-prepare and over-analyze because I assume others haven't done their homework as thoroughly as I have. In a team environment, this could create friction or cause me to second-guess operational decisions made by teammates." Castellanos actually smiled at this answer. "At least she's honest about it." Webb stood up, signaling the end of the meeting. "Selection results will be announced Monday morning at 800 hours. Morrison, report to Dr. Foster for additional psychological evaluation tomorrow at 1400. As they filed out of the briefing room, Ghost fell into step beside Ella. Despite his youthful appearance, his eyes held the weight of experience. "For what it's worth," he said quietly, "I hope you make it onto the team. We could use someone who thinks differently." That evening, Ella sat in her room cleaning her rifle for the 3rd time that day. It was a nervous habit she'd developed during her father's illness. The repetitive motion helped organize her thoughts. She thought about the satellite images of the compound, mentally rehearsing possible approaches and contingencies. Her phone buzzed with a text message from her mother back in Nebraska. "Proud of you no matter what happens. Dad would be too."
Ella set the phone aside and continued cleaning her weapon. Monday was still 3 days away, but she could feel her life balanced on the edge of something that would change everything. The question wasn't whether she wanted to join the Phantom Unit. She'd wanted that since the moment she'd first heard about their existence. The question was whether she was ready for what that choice would cost her. Dr. Foster's office was nothing like Ella had expected. Instead of the sterile clinical environment she'd imagined, warm lighting illuminated comfortable leather chairs around a coffee table stacked with psychology journals. Classical music played softly from hidden speakers. "Please sit wherever you're comfortable," Dr. Foster said, gesturing toward the seating area. She was younger than Ella had assumed during their first meeting, probably mid-30s, with intelligent eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses. Ella chose the chair that provided the clearest view of both the door and window, a habit that had become second nature during her military training. "Interesting choice," Dr. Foster noted, settling into the opposite chair with the manila folder and digital tablet. "Most people select the chair facing away from the door. They want to focus inward during these sessions. I prefer to maintain situational awareness. Even in a secure environment with someone you should theoretically trust?" Ella considered this. Trust isn't binary, ma'am. It exists in degrees based on context and experience. Dr. Foster made a note on her tablet. "Tell me about your sister." The question caught Ella off guard, though she tried not to show it. "That's not in my file. Your official military record mentions her death, but I'm more interested in how her loss affects your decision-making process." Ella's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. Sarah chose to serve as a combat medic because she believed in protecting people who couldn't protect themselves. Her death reinforced my commitment to that same principle. But you chose a combat specialty, not medical. Why?
Because sometimes protection requires eliminating threats rather than healing wounds. Dr. Foster leaned forward slightly. "Do you ever worry that your desire to honor Sarah's memory might compromise your judgment in dangerous situations?" "No, ma'am. If anything, it sharpens my focus. Even if honoring her memory might cost other people their lives?" Ella's eyes hardened. "Sarah died because someone else made poor tactical decisions that left her convoy exposed to attack. I honor her memory by making better decisions." They sat in silence for several moments. Dr. Foster continued making notes. "Let's try a different approach. I'm going to describe scenarios, and I want your immediate response. Don't overthink it." "Understood." "Your team is pinned down by sniper fire. You can flank the shooter, but it requires crossing open ground where you'll be exposed. Your team leader orders you to stay put. I follow orders unless civilian lives are at immediate risk. The sniper is targeting a school where children are evacuating. I disobey the order and engage the threat. Your team leader threatens court-martial if you move." Ella paused. "I accept the consequences and engage the threat. Your unit captures an enemy combatant who has information about an imminent attack. Standard interrogation isn't working. Your commanding officer suggests enhanced techniques. I request to be reassigned to a different aspect of the operation. He denies your request and orders you to participate. I refuse the order and document the incident through appropriate channels. Even if your refusal means the information isn't obtained and civilians die in the attack?" This question hung in the air longer than the others. Ella's training had prepared her for combat scenarios, but the moral complexity of intelligence operations was murkier territory. "I would find alternative methods to obtain the information that don't compromise ethical standards, such as building rapport, offering incentives rather than threats, bringing in interrogators with different cultural backgrounds or language skills. Sometimes information doesn't come from questioning. It comes from observation and analysis of captured materials." Dr. Foster's expression revealed nothing. "One final scenario. Your team is extracted from a mission, but intelligence indicates one team member was captured alive. A rescue mission would risk 6 lives to save 1 with low probability of success. I volunteer for the rescue mission. Your commander forbids it. I'll go anyway. That would be desertion." "Yes, ma'am." Dr. Foster closed her folder and set down her tablet. "Staff Sergeant Morrison, in your opinion, What's the difference between heroism and recklessness? Ella thought carefully before responding. Heroism involves calculated risks taken to protect others. Recklessness involves unnecessary risks that endanger others. The distinction often comes down to preparation, capability, and situational awareness. And how do you know which category your actions fall into? You don't always know at the moment, but you prepare thoroughly, assess honestly, and accept responsibility for the consequences either way. Monday morning arrived gray and drizzly, with fog rolling across the base like nature's own tactical smokescreen. Ella stood in formation with the other candidates outside the headquarters, their dress uniforms immaculate despite the humid conditions. Lieutenant Colonel Webb emerged from the building carrying a single sheet of paper. No fanfare, no dramatic buildup, just a man with a list of names. "The following personnel have been selected for assignment to the Phantom Unit," he announced, his voice carrying clearly across the formation. Captain Jennifer Walsh, Sergeant First Class Anthony Castellanos, Staff Sergeant Michael Chen, Staff Sergeant Rebecca Torres. Ella's heart rate remained steady, but she felt the familiar tightness in her chest that always accompanied moments of high stakes. 3 more names to go. Staff Sergeant David Kim, Staff Sergeant Ella Morrison. Relief flooded through her, immediately followed by the sobering realization that selection was only the beginning. Around her, successful candidates maintained military bearing, but she could see subtle signs of satisfaction. Chen's barely perceptible nod, Torres's slight relaxation of her shoulders. The unsuccessful candidates were dismissed with instructions to report to their previous units. No explanations, no feedback, just the harsh reality of military selection processes. Selected personnel will report to Building 7 at 1400 hours for mission briefing, Webb continued. You have 6 hours to handle personal affairs and prepare for immediate deployment. Questions? There were none. Ella spent the next 3 hours in her room, packing gear she might never see again, and writing letters she hoped would never be sent. The letter to her mother was the hardest. How do you explain to someone who lost one daughter that her other daughter is about to undertake the most dangerous assignment of her military career? She sealed the letter in an envelope marked, "In case of emergency," and left it in her personal effects locker. At 1400 hours sharp, the 6 selected operators gathered in Building 7's secure conference room. The space had been transformed since Ella's previous visit. Tactical maps covered every wall, and a 3-dimensional model of the target compound dominated the central table. Webb was joined by a woman Ella didn't recognize, tall, athletic, with the bearing of someone accustomed to command. Her uniform bore no visible rank or unit insignia. "This is Agent Sarah Collins from the Defense Intelligence Agency," Webb announced. "She'll be your intelligence liaison for this operation." Collins stepped forward, activating a holographic display system that projected detailed imagery above the table model. "Operation Nightfall begins in 63 hours. Your target is this facility in the Khyber Pass region, designated Objective Crimson." The hologram showed the compound from multiple angles, highlighting structural details not visible in the satellite imagery. Guard positions, patrol routes, and security systems were marked in different colors. Intelligence indicates the facility will begin production of weaponized chemical agents in 12 days. Pakistani and Afghan military units are positioning for potential conflict over territorial control of the region. If chemical weapons enter that equation, we're looking at a humanitarian crisis affecting millions of civilians. Walsh raised her hand. "What's the host government's position on our presence?" "Officially, we don't exist. Unofficially, they want the facility eliminated but can't be seen cooperating with American forces. We have a 48-hour window of intentional intelligence blindness from local military units." Castellanos studied the guard rotation charts. "How current is this intelligence?" 18 hours old. "We have assets in place providing real-time updates until you reach the insertion point." Collins switched to interior schematics of the main facility. Your primary objective is the destruction of the laboratory equipment and chemical storage areas. Secondary objective is the capture or elimination of Dr. Hassan Nazir, the facility's chief chemist. Ella examined a layout, noting choke points and potential civilian areas. Are there non-combatants on site? Minimal support staff, cooks, maintenance workers. Most are local villagers who work during daylight hours only. Night operations significantly reduce civilian risk. The briefing continued for another 2 hours, covering extraction protocols, communication procedures, and contingency plans for various failure scenarios. Each operator was assigned specific responsibilities based on their specialized skills. Ella's role combined reconnaissance and precision elimination. She would infiltrate the facility's perimeter security, neutralize key defensive positions, and provide overwatch for the assault team's entry. As the meeting concluded, Webb made eye contact with each team member. Phantom Unit has never failed a mission and never lost a team member. That record depends on every one of you performing flawlessly under extreme pressure. Questions? Torres raised her hand. What happens if we're captured? Webb's expression didn't change. You aren't captured. If compromise appears inevitable, you follow Extraction Protocol 7. Ella knew what Extraction Protocol 7 meant. She'd studied the manual thoroughly during her preparation. Some questions were better left unasked. The team was dismissed with orders to report for final equipment issue at 0600 the following morning. Deployment would begin 36 hours later. As Ella walked back to her quarters, she felt the weight of what lay ahead settling on her shoulders like familiar gear. The compound in the Khyber Pass represented everything her training had prepared her for, and everything she'd never be able to fully prepare for. Tomorrow, she would discover whether 47 seconds in a kill house had truly prepared her for war. The equipment warehouse at Fort Braxton resembled a high-tech armory crossed with a spy movie set. Rows of specialized gear lined the walls. Night vision systems, communication devices, weapons configurations Ella had only read about in classified manuals. Sergeant Major Patricia Hayes, the unit's quartermaster, moved through the space with the efficiency of someone who had equipped countless operators for missions they might not return from. Her prosthetic left hand, a legacy from an IED explosion in Iraq, manipulated equipment with surprising dexterity. Morrison, you're configured for long-range precision and infiltration, Hayes announced, leading Ella to a specialized workstation. Your primary weapon system is the M110A1 semi-automatic sniper rifle with integrated suppressor. Effective range, 800 meters. Ammunition load, 20 rounds match grade 7.62 NATO. The rifle felt perfectly balanced in Ella's hands, its weight distributed in a way that suggested countless hours of engineering refinement. She ran through the basic function checks with practiced efficiency. Secondary weapon is the HK-416 compact with subsonic ammunition for close quarters engagement. Your sidearm is the SIG P320 with extended magazine capacity. Hayes continued assembling the gear loadout. Night vision is the latest PVS-31 dual-tube system. Battery life, 40 hours continuous operation. Each piece of equipment represented cutting-edge military technology. The communication system alone probably cost more than most people's cars. But Ella understood that in operations like this, the difference between success and catastrophic failure often came down to having the right tool at the right moment. Chen was being fitted with demolition equipment at the adjacent station, specialized explosives, electronic timers, and breaching charges that could open locked doors without alerting guards 50 meters away. His engineering background made him the team's expert on structural weaknesses and controlled destruction. Torres received advanced medical supplies and battlefield trauma equipment. Her previous experience as a Special Forces medic meant she could keep team members alive under conditions that would overwhelm civilian emergency responders. The team spent 6 hours familiarizing themselves with their equipment, running through basic functions and emergency procedures. By evening, each operator could field strip and reassemble their gear blindfolded. Deployment began at 0300 hours with a flight to Ramstein Air Base in Germany.
The C-17 transport aircraft's cargo bay had been configured for long-distance travel, with military cots and basic amenities for the 14-hour journey. But sleep proved elusive for most of the team. Ella used the flight time to review satellite imagery and architectural plans one final time. She had memorized every detail of the target compound, but repetition helped identify patterns and potential vulnerabilities she might have missed initially. Walsh sat across the aisle, cleaning her weapon with the methodical precision of a professional who understood that mechanical reliability could mean the difference between mission success and team death. Her movements were almost meditative: disassemble, inspect, clean, lubricate, reassemble, function check. "Nervous?" Walsh asked, without looking up from her rifle. "Focused," Ella replied. "You?" "Same thing, usually." Castellanos dozed fitfully in his cot, but his hands remained positioned near his sidearm even in sleep, the unconscious habit of someone who had learned never to be completely defenseless. From Ramstein, they transferred to a smaller aircraft for the flight to a classified forward operating base in eastern Afghanistan. The landscape below transformed from European countryside to Middle Eastern mountains as they approached their staging area. The FOB was a study in controlled chaos: helicopters coming and going at all hours, supply convoys preparing for dangerous journeys, and personnel from various special operations units conducting their own missions. Ella recognized the insignia of Navy SEALs, Army Rangers, and units she couldn't identify. Their accommodations were Spartan but functional: a prefabricated building with 6 cots, basic sanitation facilities, and a secure communications center. They would remain here for 18 hours while final intelligence updates were gathered and weather conditions assessed. Agent Collins arrived that evening with updated reconnaissance data. The intelligence was troubling. Satellite imagery from 6 hours ago shows increased security presence at Objective Crimson. Guard force has doubled from 12 to 24 personnel. Additionally, we've identified what appears to be a visiting dignitary. 3 vehicles with diplomatic plates arrived this morning.
Webb studied the new imagery with obvious concern. Any identification on the visitor? Preliminary analysis suggests Pakistani ISI, Inner Services Intelligence. If confirmed, this complicates the operational parameters significantly. Ella understood the implications immediately. ISI presence meant potential Pakistani government involvement in the chemical weapons facility. Killing ISI personnel could trigger an international incident that would dwarf any concerns about chemical weapons. "Do we abort?" Chen asked. "Negative," Webb replied. "The facility becomes operational in 9 days. We can't wait for ideal conditions." Collins switched to thermal imaging from drone surveillance. The good news is that guard patrols remain predictable. Security increase appears to be related to the VIP visit rather than operational security awareness. The team spent the next 4 hours revising their tactical plan to account for the increased personnel. Entry and exit routes remain the same, but engagement protocols became more complex. They needed to avoid the diplomatic section entirely while still completing their primary objectives. At 2200 hours, final preparations began. Each operator applied camouflage face paint designed for the rocky, mountainous terrain surrounding their target. Equipment was inspected one last time, with particular attention to items that could malfunction at critical moments. Ella checked her rifle's scope calibration using a precision target setup in the FOB's makeshift range. At 300 meters, her shots grouped within a 2-inch circle. Acceptable accuracy for combat conditions, though she would have preferred better. The helicopter insertion would begin at 0130 hours, with a flight time of approximately 90 minutes to the drop zone. From there, they would move on foot through mountainous terrain for 6 kilometers to reach their observation post overlooking the target compound. Torres distributed pre-mission medical preparations, stimulants to maintain alertness during the long approach march, anti-inflammatory medications to prevent joint pain from carrying heavy equipment, and emergency trauma supplies each operator would carry in case medical evacuation wasn't possible. At midnight, the team gathered for final briefing updates. Intelligence indicated clear weather conditions with minimal cloud cover. Good for visibility, but challenging for concealment. Wind speeds were within acceptable parameters for precision shooting. Remember, Webb addressed the group, this is a surgical operation. We go in quietly, eliminate the threat, and extract without international incident. No heroes, no improvisation unless absolutely necessary. He made eye contact with each team member. Communications check every 15 minutes once we reach the target area. Any operator who misses 2 consecutive checks is presumed compromised, and the team continues the mission without attempting rescue. The weight of those words settled over the group. In conventional military operations, no soldier was left behind. But Phantom Unit operated under different rules in situations where recovery attempts could jeopardize global security. Ella thought about the letter she'd left in her personal effects locker back at Fort Braxton. Her mother would receive it if she didn't return from this mission. The thought was sobering but not paralyzing. She had made peace with the possibility of death when she first decided to pursue special operations. At 0100 hours, they boarded the MH-60M Black Hawk helicopter configured for special operations. The aircraft's modifications included advanced navigation systems, noise reduction technology, and defensive countermeasures designed to avoid detection by enemy radar systems. The helicopter lifted off into the Afghan night, its rotor noise muffled by engineering modifications that made it sound more like distant thunder than an approaching aircraft. Below them, the landscape stretched out in shades of gray and black, illuminated only by starlight and the pilot's night vision systems. Ella checked her equipment one final time as they flew toward their insertion point. In approximately 3 hours, she would discover whether her performance in a training facility translated to success in actual combat. The 47 seconds that had changed her military career were about to be tested against an enemy that would shoot back with live ammunition. The mountains of the Khyber Pass grew larger in the distance, their peaks silhouetted against the star-filled sky. Somewhere in those mountains, a facility was preparing to manufacture weapons that could kill thousands of innocent people. It was time to find out what Ella Morrison was truly capable of when lives depended on her accuracy and judgment. The helicopter's engines shifted to a lower pitch as they approached the insertion point, a rocky plateau 8 kilometers from the target compound. Through her night vision goggles, Ella could see the landing zone, a flat area barely large enough for the aircraft, surrounded by steep cliffs that would provide natural concealment. 2 minutes, the crew chief announced over the intercom. Each team member conducted final equipment checks with practiced efficiency. Weapon safeties were confirmed, communication devices tested, and gear secured for fast movement. There would be no second chances once they left the helicopter. The aircraft touched down with minimal rotor wash, its pilots demonstrating the precision that made them legends among special operations communities. The team fast-roped to the ground in under 30 seconds, their movements coordinated through months of training together. As soon as the last operator touched ground, the helicopter lifted off and disappeared into the night sky, leaving them alone in hostile territory with nothing but their equipment and training. Webb immediately established security while Ella surveyed their position using her rifle scope. The landscape was exactly as described in the intelligence briefings: rocky outcroppings, sparse vegetation, and natural concealment routes leading toward their target. "Movement in 2 minutes," Webb whispered into his throat microphone. "Ella, take point. Torres, rear security. Maintain 20-meter intervals." They moved through the mountains like ghosts, their advanced night vision systems turning the darkness into a green-tinted world of shadows and shapes. Ella's point position required constant vigilance, watching for enemy patrols, identifying safe routes, and detecting potential ambush sites. After 90 minutes of careful movement, they reached their observation post, a cluster of boulders that provided clear lines of sight to the target compound while offering protection from return fire. The facility lay spread out below them, exactly matching the satellite imagery they had memorized. But something was wrong. Ella studied the compound through her rifle scope, counting guard positions and identifying patrol patterns. The security presence was even heavier than intelligence had indicated.
At least 30 personnel visible, with additional positions that suggest the total number could exceed 40. Enhanced security confirmed, she whispered into her radio. Count 30-plus hostiles, multiple patrol routes overlapping. This isn't VIP security, this is defensive preparation. Walsh's voice crackled through the earpiece. Think they know we're coming? Negative, Webb replied after studying the facility through his own optics. Movement patterns are routine, not alert, but something has definitely changed their security posture. Collins's voice joined the conversation from the forward operating base. Drone surveillance from 40 minutes ago showed normal activity. Whatever triggered the increase happened recently. Ella continued her reconnaissance, mapping each guard position and identifying potential approach routes. The increased security made their original plan obsolete. Too many overlapping fields of fire, too many potential witnesses to their infiltration. New plan, Webb announced after consultation with the team. Ella, can you establish an overwatch position on the eastern ridge? Range to primary targets would be approximately 600 meters. Ella studied the ridge through her scope. It was a challenging shot, not impossible, but far from ideal. Crosswinds from the mountain valleys could affect bullet trajectory, and the elevated position would be difficult to reach without detection. Doable, but I'll need 40 minutes to reach position and verify wind conditions. Chen, can you approach the facility's power infrastructure from the north? Chen examined the electrical systems through his binoculars. The main transformer is accessible, but I count 3 guard positions with direct line of sight. Would need distraction to reach it undetected. The team spent 20 minutes developing a revised tactical plan. The increased security meant they couldn't eliminate guards quietly. Too many witnesses, too many overlapping positions. Instead, they would create a coordinated distraction that drew attention away from critical areas, while Ella eliminated high-value targets from her overwatch position. At 0347 hours, Ella began her movement toward the eastern ridge. The route required climbing nearly vertical rock faces using specialized equipment, all while carrying her sniper rifle and full ammunition load. Each handhold had to be tested carefully. A single loose rock could alert guards nearly a kilometer away. The ridge position was everything she had hoped for and more challenging than expected. Wind speeds were variable and unpredictable, shifting direction every few minutes as air currents navigated the mountain valleys. She would need to read conditions constantly and adjust her aim accordingly. Through her scope, the facility's interior was partially visible through windows and open doorways. She could see personnel moving between buildings, but identifying specific targets would require patience and careful observation. Overwatch in position, she reported quietly. Beginning target identification. Castellanos and Torres were moving into position for the main assault, while Chen approached the facility's electrical systems. Their movements were invisible to Ella from her elevated position, but their radio communications confirmed steady progress. At 0412 hours, everything changed.
A convoy of 3 vehicles approached the facility from the south, not part of the planned operation, not mentioned in any intelligence briefing. Ella watched through her scope as the vehicles entered the compound and discharged additional personnel. Unknown vehicles on site, she reported. Count 12 additional personnel, unknown affiliation. Webb's voice was tense. Can you identify vehicle types or personnel? Ella adjusted her scope's magnification and studied the new arrivals. Their equipment and movement patterns were distinctly different from the facility's regular security force. More professional, more disciplined. Assessment: military or paramilitary. Equipment suggests advanced training. Recommend abort and extract. The radio remained silent for several seconds while Webb processed this information. The presence of military personnel complicated everything. These weren't facility guards or local security. These were trained soldiers who would respond to threats with professional competence. Negative on abortion, Webb finally responded. Intelligence confirms the facility goes operational in 7 days. We proceed with a modified plan. Ella understood Webb's decision, but it didn't make her feel better about their chances. Professional soldiers would react differently to an attack than security guards. They would establish defensive positions, coordinate counterattacks, and potentially call for reinforcements. Chen's voice crackled through the radio. Approaching electrical systems now. Guards of distracted by vehicle arrivals. Through her scope, Ella could see Chen moving like a shadow toward the transformer building. His movements were textbook perfect, using shadows and concealment, timing his advances to coincide with guard attention being focused elsewhere. But she also saw something Chen couldn't see from his position. One of the newly arrived soldiers was conducting a security sweep of the facility perimeter, moving directly toward Chen's location. Chen, abort approach. Hostile moving to your position from the southwest. Negative, I'm committed, almost in position. Ella faced a decision that would define the entire operation. She could eliminate the soldier approaching Chen, but the shot would alert the entire facility to their presence. Or she could let Chen handle the situation himself, risking his capture or death. Through her scope, she watched the soldier round the corner of a building, his rifle at the ready. Chen was 30 meters from the transformer, completely exposed if the soldier looked in his direction. The soldier stopped, raised his weapon, and began scanning the area methodically. Ella's finger found her trigger. The shot was complicated, 600 meters in variable wind conditions, with a target moving unpredictably. Miss, and Chen would be captured or killed. Hit, and the entire facility would know they were under attack. She controlled her breathing, calculated wind compensation, and led the target slightly to account for his movement. The crosshairs settled on the soldier's center mass. Time seemed suspended as multiple futures hung in the balance. Everything they had trained for, everything the mission represented, came down to this single moment of decision. The soldier's radio crackled with an incoming transmission. He stopped scanning and raised the device to his ear, turning slightly away from Chen's position. Ella held her shot. Chen reached the transformer and began attaching his explosive charges, his movements swift and practiced. The soldier finished his radio conversation and resumed his patrol, moving away from Chen's location without detecting the infiltration. Charges set, 60-second delay once activated. The team was committed now. In 1 minute, the facility's power would fail and their assault would begin. Ella identified her primary targets through the scope, guard positions that would pose the greatest threat to her teammates during the assault phase. Her first shot would signal the beginning of Operation Nightfall. Everything that happened next would determine whether they saved thousands of lives or became casualties in a mountain valley that most of the world didn't know existed. Webb's voice came through her earpiece one final time before the assault began. All positions report ready. Overwatch ready. Assault team ready. Demo ready. Ella settled into her final shooting position, her rifle stabilized and her breathing controlled. In 30 seconds, she would discover whether 47 seconds in a training facility had truly prepared her for war. The countdown began in her earpiece. 10 seconds. 5, 4, 3, 2, execute. The facility's lights went out, plunging the compound into darkness. Ella's first shot split the night air and Operation Nightfall began. The compound erupted in chaos as Ella's first shot found its mark. The guard in Watchtower 3 crumpled silently, his body language suggesting immediate incapacitation rather than death, exactly as she had intended. Through her night vision scope, she tracked the facility's response to the sudden power outage. Emergency generators kicked in within seconds, bathing sections of the compound in harsh white light that created dramatic shadows between buildings. But the generators couldn't power everything simultaneously, leaving critical areas in darkness that her teammates could exploit. Target down, Ella reported, already acquiring her second target. Generator patterns confirmed, the northwest sector remains dark. Castellanos and Torres moved through the darkened area like predators, their night vision equipment providing an overwhelming advantage over defenders relying on emergency lighting. Ella watched them advance toward the main laboratory building while simultaneously tracking potential threats to their approach. A soldier emerged from the barracks building, rifle raised and scanning for threats. His position would allow him to observe her teammates' movement in approximately 20 seconds. Ella adjusted for the shifting wind conditions and fired her second shot. The soldier spun and dropped, his weapon clattering across the concrete. Not a killing shot, Ella had aimed for the shoulder, prioritizing incapacitation over lethality when possible. The distinction mattered for post-mission accountability and her own psychological well-being. Multiple hostiles converging on the laboratory, she reported, tracking several soldiers moving toward her teammates' objective, 3 from the east, 2 from the south. Chen's voice crackled through the radio. Need 30 seconds to breach the laboratory door. 30 seconds was an eternity in combat. Ella began engaging the converging soldiers systematically, her shots calculated to create maximum disruption with minimal casualties. A shot to the leg here, a shoulder wound there, enough to remove threats from the equation without unnecessary killing. But the facility's response was more organized than expected. Instead of panicking, the newly arrived military personnel were establishing coordinated defensive positions and attempting to flank her teammates' advance. "Webb, we have a problem," Ella transmitted. "These aren't facility guards. They're conducting professional small unit tactics." Through her scope, she watched a soldier directing others into overlapping fields of fire, while another appeared to be calling for external support on a satellite communication device. This wasn't a random security response. This was military coordination that suggested training and experience. "Copy that," replied. "Accelerate timeline. Chen, status on laboratory breach." 10 seconds. Ella identified her next priority target, a soldier with a rocket-propelled grenade launcher who was positioning himself to engage her teammates when they entered the laboratory building. The shot was more complex than her previous engagements, longer range, moving target, with innocent personnel potentially in the background. She tracked the soldier's movement pattern, calculated his likely position in 3 seconds, and led the target accordingly. Her shot struck his weapon rather than his body, sending the RPG launcher spinning away into the darkness while leaving the soldier alive but disarmed. "Laboratory breached," Chen announced, "entering now." Through her scope, Ella watched Castellanos and Torres disappear into the main building, while Chen provided security at the entrance. But movement in her peripheral vision caught her attention. Additional vehicles approaching from the south, their headlights cutting through the darkness. "Reinforcements arriving," she reported. "Count 4 vehicles, unknown passenger capacity." The situation was deteriorating rapidly. What should have been a surgical strike was becoming a prolonged engagement against professional military forces with the potential for significant reinforcement. Webb's voice carried new urgency. "All teams, accelerate mission completion. We have a narrow window before this becomes unsustainable." Inside the laboratory, Castellanos and Torres were systematically destroying chemical storage containers and manufacturing equipment. Through windows visible from her position, Ella could see flashes of light as they documented evidence and placed demolition charges. But the approaching vehicles were her immediate concern. If they contained additional military personnel, her teammates could be trapped inside the facility with no escape route. The first vehicle stopped near the main gate, discharging 6 armed soldiers who immediately began establishing a perimeter. The second vehicle headed directly toward the laboratory building where her teammates were operating. Ella faced another critical decision. She could engage the vehicle directly, but that would certainly result in casualties and potentially escalate the situation beyond their ability to control. Or she could disable the vehicle without harming its occupants, buying time for her teammates to complete their mission. She aimed for the vehicle's engine block, a shot that required extreme precision to avoid the passenger compartment. Her bullet struck the intended target, and the vehicle coasted to a stop with steam pouring from under its hood. Soldiers poured out of the disabled vehicle, taking cover and attempting to identify the source of the shot. But their immediate threat to the laboratory was neutralized, giving Castellanos and Torres additional time to complete their objectives. "Laboratory objectives complete," Torres announced, beginning extraction sequence. The remaining 2 vehicles had stopped at defensive positions around the compound perimeter. Soldiers were deploying with professional efficiency, establishing interlocking fields of fire that would make extraction extremely challenging. "Overwatch, can you suppress the southern approach?" Webb requested. Ella studied the southern sector through her scope. 5 soldiers had positioned themselves behind concrete barriers with clear lines of sight to her teammates' only viable escape route. Suppressing them would require rapid, accurate shots that kept them pinned down without necessarily injuring them. She began engaging systematically, shots that struck near enough to force the soldiers to take cover, but far enough away to avoid causing harm. The technique required extraordinary precision and perfect timing, but it was working. Each soldier sought deeper cover as her bullets impacted inches from their positions. "Southern approach suppressed," she reported. "You have a 30-second window." Castellanos, Torres, and Chen emerged from the laboratory building and began their extraction movement. But Ella noticed something that made her blood run cold. One of the soldiers from the original facility complement was moving toward a position that would allow him to engage her teammates from an unexpected angle. This soldier was different from the others. His movement patterns suggested special forces training, and his positioning indicated tactical awareness that exceeded his colleagues. He was deliberately staying outside her field of view while maneuvering to a position where he could ambush her teammates. Ella couldn't get a clear shot without exposing herself to return fire from multiple positions. But she could see that in approximately 15 seconds, this soldier would have a clear shot at Torres as she crossed open ground toward the extraction point. Time slowed as she calculated her options. She could maintain her concealed position and hope her teammates detect the threat themselves. Or she could expose herself to eliminate the threat, accepting significant risk to her own safety. Torres was 20 meters from cover, moving in a straight line that would take her directly across the hidden soldier's line of fire. Ella made her decision. She shifted position, exposing herself to potential observation from multiple enemy positions, and acquired the hidden soldier through her scope. The shot was at an extreme angle, requiring her to lean partially out of her concealed position. Her bullet struck the soldier in the leg just as he was raising his weapon to fire at Torres. The soldier dropped his rifle and collapsed behind cover, alive but unable to continue the engagement. But Ella's position change had been noticed. Muzzle flashes erupted from 3 different locations as enemy soldiers engaged her position with automatic weapons fire. Bullets struck the rocks around her, sending fragments of stone flying through the air. "Overwatch under fire," she reported, seeking better cover while maintaining her ability to support the extraction. Her teammates had reached the extraction point and were beginning their movement toward the helicopter landing zone. But the facility's personnel were pursuing, and Ella could see additional vehicles approaching from the valley road. "All teams, this is Webb. The extraction helicopter is 15 minutes out. We need to reach the landing zone and establish a defensive perimeter." 15 minutes was a lifetime under current conditions. Ella began engaging the pursuing forces, slowing their advance while her teammates moved towards safety. Each shot had to count, her ammunition was limited, and resupply was impossible. As she provided covering fire for the extraction, Ella reflected on the path that had brought her to this mountain ridge in Afghanistan. The kill house evaluation that had lasted 47 seconds had prepared her for split-second decision-making under pressure. But the real test wasn't about speed. It was about judgment, precision, and the willingness to risk everything to protect others. Her radio crackled with Webb's voice. "Outstanding work, Morrison. Your Overwatch saved the mission and probably saved lives." But Ella wasn't thinking about praise or recognition. She was thinking about the letter in her personal effects locker back at Fort Braxton, and about her sister Sarah, who had died believing that protecting others was the highest calling a soldier could have. As the team reached the landing zone and the helicopter descended toward them, Ella knew that everything she had trained for, everything she had sacrificed, had led to this moment when precision and courage had prevented a humanitarian catastrophe. The doubters who said women didn't belong in special operations would have their answer. But more importantly, thousands of innocent people would never know how close they had come to dying from chemical weapons that would never be manufactured. Sometimes the most important victories were the ones no one would ever hear about. The helicopter's rotors thundered overhead as Ella maintained her overwatch position, suppressing enemy fire while her teammates boarded the aircraft. Tracers from automatic weapons lit up the darkness around her, but her return fire was precise and calculated, each shot designed to keep enemy heads down rather than eliminate them entirely. "Overwatch, move to extraction now," Webb's voice cut through the combat noise. Ella fired 3 more suppressing shots, then abandoned her position in a controlled sprint toward the landing zone. Behind her, the facility's emergency lighting cast dancing shadows as soldiers attempted to pursue the retreating team. The helicopter pilot kept the aircraft hovering just above ground level, its engines at full power and ready for immediate departure. Ella reached the aircraft's side door with enemy muzzle flashes erupting from positions 300 meters away. Strong hands pulled her aboard as the helicopter lifted off into the Afghan night. Through the open door, she watched the facility shrink below them, its lights gradually disappearing behind mountain ridges as they gained altitude and distance. "Clean extraction," Webb announced into his headset. "All team members accounted for. Mission objectives achieved." Ella stripped off her gear and conducted a quick personal assessment for injuries. A few rock fragments had drawn blood from her face when enemy fire struck near her position, but nothing requiring medical attention. Around her, the other team members were conducting similar checks, the post-mission ritual of ensuring everyone had survived intact. Chen held up his digital camera, displaying photographs of the destroyed laboratory equipment. Chemical manufacturing capability is completely eliminated. Dr. Nazir's research notes were secured before destruction. Torres updated their casualty assessment. Preliminary count shows 12 enemy personnel wounded, 0 confirmed fatalities. All wounds appeared non-life-threatening based on observed responses. This was important information for the post-mission briefing. Phantom Unit's reputation for surgical precision depended partly on their ability to complete objectives with minimal collateral damage and unnecessary casualties. The flight back to their forward operating base took 2 hours, crossing mountain ranges and valleys that looked identical in the darkness. Ella used the time to decompress mentally from the combat stress, following techniques she'd learned during her psychological preparation. But her mind kept returning to specific moments during the operation. The soldier approaching Chen's position, the decision to expose herself to save Torres, the split-second calculations that had determined life and death for multiple people. Dr. Foster had asked her about the difference between heroism and recklessness. Tonight, Ella had discovered that the line between them was often measured in inches and milliseconds. They landed at the FOB as dawn was breaking over the Hindu Kush Mountains. Debriefing would begin immediately while combat details remained fresh in everyone's memory. But first came the medical evaluation, standard procedure after any operation involving enemy contact. The base medical officer, Captain Rodriguez, conducted thorough examinations of each team member. Blood pressure, heart rate, neurological responses, and psychological state assessment. Combat stress could manifest in subtle ways that weren't immediately apparent to the operators themselves. "You're running high on adrenaline, but otherwise normal," Rodriguez told Ella after completing her examination. "Any concerning thoughts or reactions to the combat?" Ella considered the question carefully. No regrets about tactical decisions. Some concern about long-term implications of the intelligence failure regarding enemy strength. "That's a healthy response. You're cleared for duty." The formal debriefing took place in the same secure facility where they had received their initial mission briefing. Agent Collins participated via encrypted video link from Washington, while Webb conducted the session with characteristic thoroughness. "Timeline reconstruction," Webb began, activating the digital recording system. "Morrison, walk us through your Overwatch sequence from first shot to extraction." Ella provided a detailed account of each engagement, including her reasoning for target selection and weapon placement decisions. The debrief was clinical and factual. Emotions and personal reactions would be addressed later in individual counseling sessions. Chen presented his assessment of the facility's destruction. Chemical storage completely neutralized. Manufacturing equipment destroyed beyond repair. Conservative estimate suggests we prevented production of weapons capable of killing 50,000 civilians. The numbers were staggering when presented so directly. 50,000 lives saved through 90 minutes of precise military action in a mountain valley that most of the world would never know existed. Collins addressed the intelligence failure regarding enemy strength. Preliminary analysis suggests the increased military presence was coincidental, related to regional tensions rather than operational security. Your team adapted effectively to unexpected conditions. Walsh raised a concern that had been troubling several team members. The professional competence of the facility's defenders suggests this wasn't a rogue operation. Someone with significant resources was backing that chemical weapons program. That assessment aligns with our post-operation intelligence analysis, Collins confirmed. This facility was likely part of a larger network. Your mission prevented immediate catastrophe, but it didn't eliminate the underlying threat structure. Ella understood the implications. Their success tonight was significant but not conclusive. Other facilities might exist, other threats might be developing, and other operations would be necessary to prevent future humanitarian disasters. After 6 hours of detailed debriefing, the team was released for rest and personal time. They would remain at the FOB for another 48 hours while final intelligence analysis was completed and their next assignment determined. Ella found herself standing outside the communications center, holding an encrypted satellite phone and staring at the number for her mother's house in Nebraska. The time difference meant it was late evening back home. Her mother would probably be reading in her favorite chair or watching the news. She dialed the number and waited through the international connection delays. Hello? Her mother's voice sounded exactly the same as always, carrying warmth and concern across 8,000 miles. Hi, Mom. It's Ella. Sweetheart, I wasn't expecting to hear from you. Are you safe? I'm safe. I can't talk about details, but I wanted you to know that I'm okay and thinking about you. You sound different. Tired, maybe? Ella smiled despite herself. Mothers had an uncanny ability to detect subtle changes in their children's voices, even across continents and through encrypted communications. It's been a challenging few days, but good and challenging. I feel like I'm finally doing what I was meant to do. Your father would be so proud. Sarah, too. The mention of her sister brought unexpected emotion. Ella had carried Sarah's memory through every moment of the operation, using it as motivation and moral guidance. Tonight, she felt like she had finally honored that memory in a meaningful way. I love you, Mom. I need to go, but I wanted to hear your voice. I love you too, sweetheart. Be careful out there. After ending the call, Ella walked to the base perimeter and looked out at the mountains where they had conducted their operation. Somewhere in those peaks, a facility lay dark and abandoned, its potential for mass destruction eliminated by 6 soldiers who had risked everything to protect people they would never meet. 2 days later, they received their next assignment. Another facility, another threat, another opportunity to prevent catastrophe through precision and courage. The war against chemical weapons proliferation wasn't ending, it was expanding. But as Ella prepared for their next mission, she reflected on how much had changed since that day in the kill house when she had cleared the course in 47 seconds. The doubters who said women didn't belong in special operations had been proven wrong. But more importantly, she had proven to herself that she could perform under the most extreme pressure imaginable. The kill house had tested her speed and accuracy. Real combat had tested her judgment, courage, and commitment to protecting others. She had passed both tests, but the second one mattered more. 6 months later, Ella received a commendation for her actions during Operation Nightfall. The ceremony was classified, attended only by senior military officials who understood the significance of what the Phantom Unit had accomplished. No media coverage, no public recognition, just the quiet acknowledgement that sometimes the most important victories happen in the shadows. 2 days later, they received their next assignment. Another facility, another threat, another opportunity to prevent catastrophe through precision and courage. The war against chemical weapons proliferation wasn't ending, it was expanding. But as Ella prepared for their next mission, she reflected on how much had changed since that day in the kill house when she had cleared the course in 47 seconds.
The doubters who said women didn't belong in special operations had been proven wrong, but more importantly, she had proven to herself that she could perform under the most extreme pressure imaginable. The kill house had tested her speed and accuracy. Real combat had tested her judgment, courage, and commitment to protecting others. She had passed both tests. 6 months later, Ella received a commendation for her actions during Operation Nightfall. The ceremony was classified, attended only by senior military officials who understood the significance of what the Phantom Unit had accomplished. No media coverage, no public recognition, just the quiet acknowledgement that sometimes the most important victories happen in the shadows.
But the real recognition came from her teammates, who had learned to trust her judgment and rely on her skills. From Webb, who assigned her increasingly complex and critical missions. From intelligence analysts who incorporated her tactical assessments into strategic planning. And from the knowledge that somewhere in the world, 50,000 people were alive because she had spent 47 seconds in a training facility proving that precision mattered more than preconceptions. The doubters had been wrong about women in special operations, but more importantly, they had been wrong about what it meant to be a warrior. Strength wasn't just about physical capability, it was about moral courage, tactical intelligence, and the willingness to sacrifice everything to protect others. Ella Morrison had found her calling in the mountains of Afghanistan, but her story was just beginning. In a world where threats evolved daily and innocent lives hung in the balance, soldiers like her would always be needed. The next mission briefing was scheduled for 800 hours. She would be ready. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hits the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.